in this new post-industrial society, we see the effects of the dissolvement of that which was useful at one point to the elite. Now they don't need it anymore, because even a family is still a form of a mini tribe. People will stand up for each other and their rights for family members. If you destroy the family unit, completely eradicate it, then you've accomplished your mission. Now it's the state's right to you. In a totalitarian regime, the state, I've said over and over, and the philosophers have all spoken about it, is taught at high levels. The state must reign supreme in every area of a person's life. The state only must be the only ones authorized and allowed to use force. That's why no one else can use any force, even to protect yourself against a bear or whatever. This is taught in officers' training colleges for the military. It's also taught in the training colleges for the military and the police. That ultimately, to have a safe society, you must have a predictable society, which means complete data collection on every individual at all times. If someone gets drunk and drives a car and kills someone on the coast or thousands of miles away, why would a law be passed on the books so that every motorist must get stopped and give breathalyzers or have some policeman with his nose two inches from yours to see if you've been drinking? Well, that was all tested out in the Soviet system, which is now implemented here. In the Soviet system, they had communal punishment, so if one person broke a law which someone else could break, then the whole society had to be regarded as possible suspects before the event occurred. In other words, we're all capable of crimes. How do you stop crime? You've got to stop free thought. How do you stop free thought? Well, ultimately, you've got to either destroy that part of the brain that makes you an individual and gives you the ability to choose, or you do it by implanting them with something. Both of these methods have been heavily discussed. The former has actually been practiced to an extent through the introduction of drugs and inoculations. And if you follow the IQs, the new IQ, by the way, is quite a few points lower than the last IQ. It was released a few months ago. And we're supposed to think this is a normal thing. We would just drop 10 points on the IQ level. As though if you started getting shorter, losing 6 inches in a generation, that would be normal too. This is how we're given this kind of data. But then when you read Arthur Koestler's book, The Ghost in the Machine, where he works for the United Nations, he sits on think tanks to find ways of lobotomizing chemically or bacteriologically or virally parts of the brain to destroy individualism for world peace, mind you. And their only problem was, do we inject it into them, do we put it in their water, their food, or spray it from the air? Well, take your pick. Take your pick. The bad news is this has been going on. You don't employ thousands of people in what is a world government. That's what the United Nations is set up to be. It's not there to be a social worker that hands out bread. That's the television PR stuff. Read the books written just prior to the setup of the UN, the ones written during the 1940s to do with the United Nations and its functions and its goals and missions, and then you'll clue in to what the UN really is. It was set up to be world government, step by step. Every country which signed on to it technically gave up its sovereignty. And if you break that rule that you've signed, they call you a rogue nation. That means you've broken the contract. You've broken the contract. So it's not just a referee between people or nations. It's ultimately the final arbiter. It's the king system for globalization. And to bring peace, they're always talking about, they'd have to either lobotomize you or put a chip in your brain. And the chipping part was discussed at the meetings at Loyola University when the scientists from all countries met for the international meeting on this very topic. And we see it now promoted in movies, as we said at that meeting they would do. They promote this idea into the public's minds of an inevitability of chipping down the road by putting in comics, cartoons, novels, and now we have them. You can read some, watch them, like the Cutter, you know, the Final Cut. And children get it in their cartoons where the superheroes are part robot and they have chips in them and they have all these super strengths and abilities, and the youngsters think that, gee, that would be great to have something like that. But the real objective is to make a form of the Borg where we're all one. We'll all be one, linked to the central computer. So we have a number, and when you become faulty, they'll just call you in for readjustment or elimination or recycling perhaps. This is the real world we live in. We pay through taxation for all these think tanks to find ways of controlling us more and more and more. And they know how to do it, they have the technology to do it, and we still think, because of the optimism part of the brain, which is well understood, we all have a little part called the optimist part, that nobody would do that. Nobody would do that because I wouldn't do that to them. And that's why these things are allowed to happen. I used to wonder when I was first shown around a farm by a schoolmate of mine, and he took me around the calves that were in stalls, and he'd say, pat them, and they'd roll these big eyes at you, and he'd say, stick your hand in their mouth, and you stuck your hand in their mouth, and he'd suck away there and slobber away. And these were really nice things, you see, creatures. And what I could never fathom is why farmers could talk affectionately about animals which they were going to eat or sell for profit that would be eaten. It's a dilemma for some of us. Until you take that same personality type, boost it up into a dominant minority role, where you're given a completely different meaning of life in the universe and the way things run. And they talk about us the same way. They don't say that they hate the public or nasty. In fact, they talk in a very nice manner about it all. So nice, like Aldous Huxley, that you've got to really think about what he's saying for it to hit home that this person is saying such horrible things in the nicest possible way. Because the good shepherds in all ages must cull the sheep, you see, eventually, once in a while. That's what they're there for. In the next million years, by Charles Galton Darwin, his biggest fear was the threat that the commoners who were breeding out of control, according to him, would become so numerous they'd dilute the gene pool, and eventually some of the more elite classes might join them and interbreed and lose their special genes and become dumb and stupid and watch soccer and stuff like that. So he was all worried about keeping them separate and killing off the lower ones, or sterilizing them compulsorily. So we tied all this in with all the agendas that are on the go, all meshing with each other. And Joe Average would think by reading papers and magazines that they're all disconnected and just happenstance, and it's just the way things go. But nothing is further from the truth. Everything in culture creation is planned and allowed or disallowed. Nothing can happen in a system that might upset the system. Nothing that hasn't been discussed and argued about in panels, and the pros and cons of repercussions down the road. Plato went into this stuff over 2,300 years ago. Well understood these sciences. The New Age movement is part of it. You bring them in gradually through fascinating them with the unknown. The unknown is a fascinating thing. We all have this little bit of what makes things tick, what's behind the things we see. Why do things happen the way they do when they shouldn't happen or should happen or whatever? And forces, the god of forces is another little term the way they'll couch it. So we are watching the creation, and we're led through it actually, of the creation of a new religion for a new era called the New Age. And this New Age has spokesmen like Michael Gorbachev, amongst many others that all intermesh, and his Green Party, or his little green Lazarus flag there, nice Lazarus, writing about the creation of the New Age movement, where a form of earth worship must be introduced into the minds of people. And the day will come when children will voluntarily step forward to be sterilized for Mother Earth. And you better believe only certain lower orders who will take part in this, because the elite don't have to. They're special genes. They've proven their worth. They can dominate, and they're too cunning. But they don't need all of the hands anymore for their new pristine planet that they want to create with their habitat regions and animal corridors and armies of forestry guys that are really just another uniformed army. Uniform, one form, Masonic again. All uniforms are.